Hello and welcome to the THE webinar, AI in the Classroom, What Enhances Student Learning and What Doesn't, held in partnership with VitalSource. My name is Sridhu and I'm the Deputy Editor for Brand Content at THE. AI has become a subject of widespread popularity and intense debate in higher education. While it has the potential to reshape teaching and learning, its effectiveness depends on how it is used. In today's discussion, we will explore where AI can genuinely help students learn better and where it risks missing the mark. Before we get started, I would like to mention that this webinar is being recorded and we'll share an on-demand video and a summary article with all the participants after the webinar. We'll also be taking questions from the audience, so please use the Q&A function to post any questions you have. We have a wonderful panel joining us today. Our panel brings a broad range of perspectives from different parts of the world. I will now invite the panelists to introduce themselves. Simon, could we start with you?
Of course, and hello and welcome everybody. My name is Simon Thompson. I'm a Professor of Hybrid Learning, but also Director of Flexible Learning at the University of Manchester in the UK.
Thank you. Yuan Zhen?
Hey everyone, I'm Yuan Zhen from the National University of Singapore. I'm the Director of Teaching and Learning in the Center for Teaching, Learning and Technology. Hi everyone. Yeah.
Thank you. And Trasa?
Hello, my name is Trasa Carney and I'm here from the University of Liverpool. I'm the Director of Education here in the Marketing Group, as well as Editor for Developing Academic Practice, which is our university journal. Thank you.
And Rafi?
Hi, my name is Abdul Rafi. I'm from Khalifa University. Basically, I'm a senior technologist at the university. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Mike?
Hey, I'm Mike Hale, Chief Learning Officer from VitalSource Technologies.
Thank you. Our discussion is on how AI can enhance learning, but that phrase can mean different things depending on who you ask. So before we get into the specific details or use cases, I would like to hear the panelists' take on that. So when we talk about enhancing learning using AI, what key aspects do you think are the most critical to focus on and why? Trasa, could you start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a really interesting question because often it comes down to ultimately what are intended learning outcomes. Often we also fall back on, oh, it's critical thinking, and that is really important. Don't get me wrong, that's so important. But ultimately we need to sit back and go, well, what is the intended learning outcome of this seminar, of this lecture, of this program, of this module, how it fits within a program? So what are we trying to achieve in using the AI? Is it that we're trying to achieve critical thinking? Is it that we're trying to achieve, helping students just remember something, whether it's for an exam, whether it's statistical data, depending on your discipline, depends on the need and how that AI can be applied within that situation. So I think it's really important to consider, are we using AI to evaluate? Are we using it for cognitive thinking? Are we using it for critical thinking? Are we using it for fun, icebreaker sessions? And sometimes that's what we do use AI for. Or is it a combination? And so when we're thinking about enhancing our learning, it always has to come back to what's the intended learning outcome? What's the constructive alignment that we need to be doing? Like, what is the key purpose of using this? I can add more to that, but I know I've got other panelists there nodding away, so hopefully they have other things they might like to add to that.
Would anyone else like to come in on this one? Yes, Yunjin, please go ahead.
Yep. Like Trasa actually give a very well summary of what we actually should look into the AI in teaching. I guess one point that we need to be quite cautious about is actually what it actually replaces. So we actually invite the educator to actually think about when you actually make use of AI or any technology for that matter, what is it that is actually trying to replace, right? So if it's actually a core skill of the discipline, you may need to be actually thinking very carefully about it, right? Because some of the skill you actually need to train the fundamentals before they can actually make use of a tool like AI. And that's why we actually emphasize on the idea of they actually should collaborate, right? So the AI and the human should collaborate and they should have meaningful contribution, right, in their work, so that the end product, right, is using an old phrase, is 1 + 1 should be greater than 2, should be greater than the human or the AI production. Yeah.
Thank you. And Mike, could I also ask you to come in on that from a VitalSource point of view?
Sure. Both of my fellow panelists make really interesting observations. VitalSource is in an interesting position because, we're not right there in the classroom with folks. We work across universities all over the globe, delivering a lot of these tools. So what we would say is, one, we think it's very important for universities to evaluate what tools they want to use. And when they're evaluating, they should think about, are these tools being used in line with learning science? Teresa started with, hey, look, you got to think about what are the learning outcomes? And one of the things we know is learning science has pretty well established how best folks learn. There are lots of techniques, there's lots of ways to approach it. And so there's lots of tools being built using LLMs. And so when you do that, think about the outcomes and think about how that LLM, the tool base using LLMs, is used to do that. And if you're building something yourself asking students to do it, your role seems to be as a coach. And that's outside of our expertise. It's on the folks in the classroom. And it's exciting to hear some of the things that folks are doing in the classroom using these tools, because the students are using them on their own and often in not very helpful ways.
Simon?
Yeah, so I think for us, what we're kind of seeing is there's 2 levels at which you can use AI in the classroom. One is at a more broad study skills kind of level. So we're seeing a lot of learners using it to consolidate note taking, for example, because note taking as a kind of cognitive function is a really useful thing to be doing, but it can also take you away from being present in the learning. And so using AI to support that can be a really valuable thing. And also then learners using AI to consolidate their thinking around those note taking is also there. And then you have what we've kind of touched on with the learning outcomes, which is where you get more disciplinary level use of AI. So AI in the context of history, for example, AI use in the context of science and engineering, and those are very different to each other. So I think we've got kind of what we're seeing emerging is a whole set of AI literacy to be able to study effectively, but also a set of AI literacy that's absolutely tied to the discipline.
Thank you. I think carrying on from some of the points that Simon mentioned about how AI is being used in the classroom, just to look at what is happening now. How are institutions using AI in the classrooms, or students are using AI in the classrooms today? And what patterns do you see emerging in practice? Rafi, could I come to you?
Yeah, when just touching on the same points of my colleagues, they were telling on the classrooms. Basically, we are trying ourselves to have automated grading because we are a face-to-face institute. So trying to see how, in a face-to-face environment, when you have an assessments, we wanted to automate them so that it's much faster and time saving precisely on those lines also. So when it comes to some of the LMS now, it's already capable of having, AI content creations and creating some, graphics, images, and those line of on those things. As well as students are using a type of an AI tutor to LMSs nowadays have capabilities of that. And some of them already made some AI tutors and trying to answer a few questions and making sure the students are, it's more personalized to them. These are some areas that we are working on and piloting and testing it out from the student side as well as on the faculty side.
Thank you. You and Jen, any examples from your institution where AI has made a difference or where it didn't quite live up to the hype?
So I guess we will share a more interesting example, right? Because I think when you talk about ChatGPT or similar Gen AI tools, the first thing that come to your mind will be essay writing, content generation, and so on. What we actually find quite interesting, and the student actually respond quite well to it, is actually to use it as role play, right? So what we call it actually persona. Basically, you instruct the Gen AI to play a certain role so that student can interact with it and learn some kind of communication skill, or actually learn how to apply certain technique, right, in a more or less authentic situation. I think the discipline that we actually have with that actually make use of this with good success is, for example, social work. Where they actually want to get the student to learn, or how do you actually talk to a senior when they actually have some needs, but they actually are not fluent in a certain language. How do you actually communicate with them? And we can't really actually get them to try this out in the real world, right? Because that would be the actual interaction, right? So they build a AI chatbot in a sense with that kind of personality, right? So that the student can learn to interact with it. The other similar one is actually from the law faculty, where they actually get the AI to play the role of the witness, right? So that the junior student, right, in law school can learn how to cross-examine, right, this witness. The witness could be very dodgy, right? Could be actually quite suspicious, and so on, right? So that's actually what we find quite useful and interesting. Yeah.
Russell.
Yeah, Yujay makes a really good point there regarding kind of that role play and all the different types of AI that we have. Like there's such a multitude, as Mike pointed out, depending on the discipline. But it's that hype of using what AI is and what AI can do, but it's also letting students understand what are the limitations of each of those AI. There's such a multitude of AI. I was speaking to a colleague of mine, Liam Kane, and he works in the library. And one of the things he does, and it does it throughout the different disciplines, is that goes into a seminar and provides students with different AIs. So maybe ChatGPT, maybe Gemini, maybe Grok. And each student has exactly the same task, but they're only allowed to use that particular AI tool. So at the end of the seminar, maybe they produce a poster, or they produce a written piece, or whatever it is that is needed for that particular discipline. But what's really interesting for the students then is having that conversation of how each AI has produced something very different and potentially inaccurate or untrue because of the AI tool that they were using, and helping students understand that, for example, Grok uses X as its fundamental basis versus the likes of ChatGPT, which uses just a very small portion of information that's available online. To these different tools can produce different results. And sometimes students then are quite surprised that they're like, oh, I thought it just was an all-knowing, all-being information piece. And actually then, and I think it's really important with our students that at the very early stages of their educational career, that they get this understanding of those different tools and what their limitations are, and where the data and where the information's coming from. Because that information tool, that goes back to a fundamental thought of why we go to university: critical thinking. Where is that information coming from? So I think that's a really good use of those AI tools, and helping actually students learn and develop where information is actually stemming from.
Thank you. That is a fascinating example. Mike?
Yeah, just a quick comment relating to what Tracy was saying. What is really important, and I feel like I'm stating the obvious here, but some folks have talked about AI being a technology that, can help scale education, which is true. But what it can't do is really replace the instructor and coach. And Tracy was giving some great examples of that. It's super important that we continue to teach students how to use the various tools, particularly the AI tools. for example, the notion of hallucinations that we all worry about with AI, less so because they're becoming better and better. One of the things that's sort of fundamental to these LLMs is keeping in mind that actually everything any individual LLM produces is actually a hallucination. It's just most of them are correct. It doesn't know anything. But yeah, I just want to emphasize how important it is and to really be the coach and help students use these things and use them appropriately. Because as a student, as a father of a college student and talking to a lot of his friends, I can tell you a lot of these students are not using them well on their own.
I guess going back to Trust's example, these decisions are not just about which tools to adopt, but also why. And that involves looking beyond the hype. So I was curious, what are the key institutional priorities when adopting AI tools in the classroom? If I could come back to you, Trust, that if that's okay.
I think what's really important in terms of institutions taking a policy is, well, when it first came out, a lot of universities were like, no, ban it, not allowed, just let's stop. And it's the wrong approach. We're all using it in our everyday lives. Like, as part of our jobs, we are using these tools. But it's that understanding of how we use those tools. So a colleague of mine wrote a paper, and I can put it in the chat, Heather et al. 2024, and they talk about it needs to be student-led. We need to have an understanding of this generation that is coming through. They are a generation that have grown up using tools that we didn't use growing up. It didn't exist. It wasn't there. So we need to have an understanding of why and how they're using tools, so that then we can put in a policy of understanding, where are they coming from? It's very much about a co-creation of where are they coming from? What is their starting point, and understanding that starting point of the students, and then figuring that policy to constantly be updated. And this is the problem with university policies, is firstly, AI is moving so fast that we can't keep up with it. Turnitin could to detect whether something was AI, then it couldn't. Then we had detection tools for kind of saying, oh, this is definitely AI. Oh, I'm not 100% sure. They're getting better. And they're getting better, not month by month, but day by day, these tools are being enhanced. So our policy needs to show adaptability, flexibility, which are some of the tools we should be teaching our students. But going back to what a policy needs to look like, I think it's difficult to kind of set in stone, and that's the key point, I think, of a policy, is any policy needs to be a moving and just needs to be flexible to the extent of, yes, we need to clearly say, look, you can't use ChatGPT to write your essay. That's an obvious one. But what can we use these AI tools? How can we allow them for adaptability for students? How can we allow for these AI tools to enhance diversity, to enhance students' ability to be better, to enhance their knowledge? So I do think we just need to go back to the students and figure out what their starting point is and what point do we want to meet them at. It goes back to, how do we want to teach? What is the purpose of using those AI tools? And as Mike said, each discipline may have a slightly different purpose. And so one university-wide policy might not always make sense depending on the discipline. I don't know how others kind of feel about that, or what their university policies are. But I think the other thing is to understand staff. Staff don't necessarily all know what the policies are. And then trying to adapt and understand how to apply those policies when they fully don't understand those AI tools either. I think it's not just about the policy, but how the staff apply the policy and staff's understanding of the policy. But the time that staff have to understand AI and the policies among every other aspect that they are trying to do at the moment.
Simon, has that been your experience, especially in your role as the director of flexible learning?
So I think you're absolutely right. A university does have to have a position, because otherwise then it's just people aren't sure what they're allowed to do and what they aren't allowed to do. From our point of view at Manchester, we've really gone down the route of principles. So a set of guiding principles for the use of AI in the context of teaching and learning. And I think that gets over that problem of it being a policy that you have to change annually because the system changes. What you're doing is setting a set of principles by which you can then operate your AI system. So I think what we've kind of got is a sense of we can use AI both in a kind of from an academic point of view and from a student point of view. And actually academics and students should learn together. And I think that's one of the real, perhaps one of the things that we can probably do in the kind of the emergence of AI is say we're all learning at the same time with this, because actually we all have the opportunity to access AI. Even if the university is not providing a platform, everyone can access a form of AI and probably are. But what's important is we understand in the context of learning and teaching what we can do with it. And for me, it is about this symbiotic understanding and developing together. So students sharing their experiences with academics, academics sharing their experiences with learners. I think one really nice example that I've come across is you talked about they can't write essays, but how when you think about the use of AI in the context of an essay, we've got some staff that are getting learners to create essay structures using AI. So AI is giving them a suggestion for an essay structure. They're bringing that to the classroom to critique it with their tutor. And for me, that's the real value of that. And we've got a kind of principle that it's got to be human checked AI. So at any point at which you're using AI, it's got to be human checked. Now, that could be academic human checked, or it could be the students themselves triangulating that understanding. But ultimately, we want people to play with AI, and we want to say, yes, do that in the safety of your academic environment with the staff and the learners.
As some of our panelists touched on, another challenge is that the technology itself is in a state of flux and there's a lot to navigate. So what are some of the challenges that you've encountered or observed when trying to use AI in the classroom? Rafi, could I get your take on that?
Yeah, so when you look at, because AI is the last 2 years, but we know that previously we have internet, phones, mobility, things that distracted our learning and teaching. So there is always a gap between the learner and the teacher. So when it comes to the AI part, so implementing such tools into the classroom, there are a lot of interoperabilities because there is an existing systems and we need to implement certain things and also the AI, the persona, whatever we create has to be within the syllabus context, and it should not be going around everywhere. So basically what we found is, if you want to tell me in one word, is AI is giving productivity, but it's not making decisions. The instructors are the ones who are making the decisions. If the learners are using, then the learners are making that decisions. So still the learners and the teacher has to be there as a human, but basically in the environment, the existing environment, how it fits the AI tools into the classroom. So that's very key, the interoperability. Also data sensitivity. So how these data is being used, the students' data by these tools. We need to be very careful when we are implementing such things. And also there are tools that is not all the tools. We don't need to automate everything. We need to be very careful when we do that. So just for the sake of AI, we don't want to automate and do things. So it is more towards really, we always look at these tools like really it makes any sense, any value to the students as well as teachers. And then we study them. We do a piloting with a small group of educators, and they get their feedbacks. And not every tool is different. So sometimes this tool doesn't fit to another discipline or across disciplines. So we need to be careful sometimes, in taking it to the same point of essay. The context, getting feedback on essay is very difficult by the AI. So there are a lot of things that goes with when you're implementing into the classroom. So we study all those things before we do a full implementations on classrooms or even institutional wide.
One of the points that you touched on also shows just how much intentional support is needed. What steps can universities take to help faculty and students use AI in ways that really support teaching and learning? What strategies would you recommend for training faculty and students to use AI confidently?
So just going on the same line, whenever we wanted to implement anything, the first thing that we look at is there is a gap between the learner and the educator. So we need to educate the educators first, provide them training, provide them, type of a guidelines, what tools to be used, what not to be used, and how these tools can enhance the teaching and learning. We need to provide them a clear guidelines, provide them continuous training on those things. So that's why we don't want it to, as the technology change, we don't want to rush and try to implement things. No, we wanted to wait, learn. At the same time, we don't want to be, behind. So we wanted to be ahead, but at the same time, we need to be cautious. So we provide them training, we provide them guidelines, and we also have continuous professional development, weeks we conduct them, and so that we make sure that educators understand that students are using AI. So how you can also be part of that AI.
Thank you. You and Jen, if I could come to you next, what are the challenges that you faced at NUS and how are you addressing them?
Yeah, I guess the challenges mentioned are quite similarly shared. So I'm actually quite glad that we are in this panel, right, to share some of our suffering, right, and challenges and struggles. So I think one of the key points that you yourself actually mentioned is that the technology itself is moving very, very quickly. So we like to actually joke in our own workshop that whatever we teach you right now, as soon as you walk out from this workshop, it could be obsoleted by that point, right? So the technology itself is moving at such a huge speed. That's actually one of the challenge, right? Because when these technologies start to emerge, one of the immediate response for colleagues will be, it's all right, we just redesign assessments so that it's not possible for the AI to handle, right? We like to call it the AI resistant path, right? So, but it turns out that this capability is actually changing week by week. So if you actually try to go down that path, essentially you need to rethink, right, your assessment almost all the time. So rather, we actually encourage colleagues to think in the reverse direction, meaning that we have to accept AI is here to stay, and then our students are going out to a workspace that will be assisted by AI technology in future, right? So I think the correct way to look at this would be to encourage them to redesign that incorporate AI, the AI integration. But the challenge will be this is different, right, from discipline to discipline. For some will be slightly more straightforward in a sense, right? So colleagues from the STEM side will find it quite straightforward in the sense that it's a tool that you can incorporate, right, to use to enhance your skill. But then, for example, colleagues who actually teach English, essay writing will find it fundamentally change, right, what they actually want to ask the student to do, right? So I guess that's basically the challenges that we face, which is actually a wide spectrum, right, of the different difficulties, and then the speed where this technology is moving. Yeah.
Thank you. Moving on to another aspect of this, there is a lot of excitement about AI, adding AI features to edtech tools. The challenge there, of course, is making sure that those features actually help students learn, aren't misused or distracting. We often talk about consequences like reduced cognitive effort in students. So what are the most important factors to consider when integrating AI capabilities into existing digital systems or tech platforms to make sure that they enhance learning? Yes, Mike, please.
Yeah, maybe I'll start as an educational technologist at a company where we're wrestling with exactly this. We actually have a team of learning scientists at VitalSource who have helped shape lots of what we've done through the years. And as AI came about, we'd actually been working with AI over the last 8 years. Of course, more natural language processing, more ML than Gen AI. And so one of the first things we did is, look, we're in the business of delivering tools that help learning, and we try to do everything focused around the basics of learning science. So the first thing we did, just using natural language processing and other machine learning techniques, is we would take an e-textbook, and you can use machines to read it and spit out assessments on the other side. Seems like a simple tool, actually very, very time saving, because one of the things we know is that well-formed assessments done alongside reading improves learning, the doer effect. But producing assessments is expensive. Human created assessments are very expensive. That's why commercial publishers don't create a lot of that. So we developed a tool that did that, and we released it. And I think we've had about 100 million questions answered or something along that. But as Gen AI came out, we of course added to that, and now because we're focused on what we can, where we can help learning. Where we can help learning is around an e-textbook, which is only some of what is out there. There's so many different tools out there. But take an e-textbook, which we know students today don't typically use as much as we would like them to. In the print textbooks, they didn't use those as much, but we just didn't know, we didn't have the data. So now we are building things where you can interact with the book. Just a chat that allows the student to ask questions of the book, and then of course the chat can respond and build learning tools around that. We've seen a proliferation of these kinds of tools, and if I was on the other side, I'm really curious to hear from other panelists. There's so many, a plethora. Evaluating these tools and how you think they might serve the learning outcomes that you need your institution are going to be really important.
You and Jen, and then I'll come to Rafi.
I think the question that I would like to answer from a different angle, instead of talking about what is actually needed, I would actually want to propose something that what should not be done, right? So in a sense, what I propose is the antithesis of software design, right? So when you design software, I come from the School of Computing, right? So when we design software, we want to talk about frictionless user experience. But I thought when you're actually designing an EdTech tool with AI for the student and teachers, we need to be very cautious about to insert necessary friction, right? To make sure certain things are not just streamlined away, right? So I will give you an example, right? So one thing that I think the panelists already mentioned is that we want to insist that there's a human in the loop, right? So at any point in time, you cannot take the student or the teachers out of the learning and teaching loop. Then the second one is that we need to resist the urge, right, to make it really convenient, right, to basically fulfill all the wish or desire of the students. I give you an example. Instead of giving the student the answer, you can actually think about how you actually lead the student or actually force the student to think about certain line of thoughts, right, to arrive at the answer, right? Student will hate this, but I think that's actually what is needed right now, right? So instead of having a seamless streamlined experience, we need to insert intentional friction, right, to make sure that the learning objective is actually achieved with the aid of AI. Yeah, so that's something to share.
Thank you. Rafi, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think, Dr. Sung has put that word. Basically, it has to be easier. Any technology that you want to integrate with the EdTech platform, when you consider those factors, the main thing is it has to be very easy for our learners as well as for the educators. It has to be easy. It should not make even 2-3 clicks. No, we consider them has to be very simple. At the same time, it has to map to the learning outcomes. This is very, very critical. And also it has to be pedagogically aligned as essential. These are the two things that. So when it comes to the next is to the technical side, interoperability, usage, data sensitivity, all this is another area of things. But when it comes to the learners and educators, it has to be simple, and it should do map with outcomes. So these are something that I want.
And Trasa.
Yeah, I think just kind of bring this back to a point that was mentioned earlier, which is that human-centered and the importance of that human element. And I feel this really needs to be stressed when we're talking about AI. One of the unintended consequences of students using AI is they're not asking and they're not doing peer-to-peer learning. And peer-to-peer learning, that social learning, is so important. It's so important for individuals. As human beings, we go through a process of social learning. What do other people think? But also, for example, in the classroom, when a student sees another student asking a question, they know themselves, then it's like, oh, I didn't know that either. I'm so glad they didn't know that. We're going to learn about this together. And so it's really important that AI isn't taking away from that social learning, that when we use these tools in seminars or in lectures, that we're not saying to students, now go home, sit in the room by yourself. As we know, and sorry to bring up COVID, but student loneliness skyrocketed. At some of the universities here in the UK, nearly 99% of students say they're lonely. That's shocking. Mental health issues have just skyrocketed. And I'm not trying to go off on, another line of thought, but I just bringing that back to that human-centered approach. I think Mike, mentioned earlier that human element is so important. So when we are using these tools, one of the challenges in the classroom is, yes, students, maybe they're working in a group, they're working with the tool, but sharing among themselves what they found. I think that sharing aspect and that social aspect is so important, because ultimately, many of the panelists have mentioned, AI is a tool. It's not a skill, it's a tool. And we need to learn how to be adaptable. We need to learn how to critique it. And that's something we need to be teaching our students. AI in itself isn't necessarily a skill. It's a tool that we can use to enhance our creativity skills, maybe enhance our critical thinking skills, but it itself is not a skill, in my opinion.
We will explore that topic about AI skills in depth in a few minutes, but thank you, Trasa. Simon?
Yeah, so I suppose what's interesting me is in the context of learning and teaching, what do we want AI to be able to do? For me, I want it to be able to be a sort of version of me when my students don't have me when they're independent studying. So for example, in a seminar, students use me to ask questions and me to help them move forward in their learning in a kind of really critical way. I think AI should be able to do that to some level. So what I'd like to be able to do is I'd like to be able to train AI. So in a learning context, I think I should be able to train AI a little bit. So it responds in a way that I would expect to respond, but it can probably and help then students in that independent study bit. And I think we do have a real challenge is we ask our students to do a lot of independent study. And I think if we get AI right, it could really help them deepen their learning and understanding in a really meaningful way. And this is about prompt engineering. So how can we also then use AI to help students learn how to prompt AI more effectively and ask the kind of questions that I would ask them? So I think that is one of the potentials of AI, particularly in the learning and teaching context, is how we can start to develop AI that provides responses that are similar to those that an academic tutor might provide in the context of that learning setting.
To continue on that thread a little more, how can institutions measure and evaluate the real impact of AI on student learning? I guess beyond surface level metrics, how do we make sure that we are amplifying the right elements of learning? Who would like to come in on that? You and Jen, can I come to you?
I guess yeah, that's a interesting and challenging question. Maybe I will share a little bit of how we are actually thinking about this at the moment. In a sense, this is already something that we ask our educator to think about, right? When we actually ask them to talk about their teaching and learning, we actually ask them to, in a sense, show evidence of how students are learning better, right, under certain kind of teaching intervention and so on. So in a sense, there's no different from the use of AI. So it will be incorporated into evaluating how students learn better or worse, right, with the intervention of these AI tools. But I think the struggle will be whether there will be an institution-wide way of our metrics that we use. At the moment, I don't think we're going down that route, but rather asking the educator to come up with measurements that's meaningful, right, in their own discipline. Yeah.
Thank you. Simon?
So I suppose picking up from what I was just talking about really is the numbers will, the numbers will be huge, but they'll be meaningless really, because it doesn't really show you, it shows you an interaction. What I think we should be doing is, and the example I gave is when a learner is using AI in the context of independent study, is that they also bring that back into the classroom. And then the tutor can, that's the human-centered bit, the human checking bit, goes, actually, those are great responses. So this has done a really good job in the context of that question that you asked it. Here's some other prompts you might want to try. And I think it then becomes up to an educator to start to review those responses that they've given, and then again, re-engineer, re-inform the AI to make that a better system. So that cyclical model of reviewing and refreshing. And we should, I think, in the context, it's going to be very difficult for me to actually add to ChatGPT as a large language model and get that to be something that I think is learner centric. But if you're talking in the context of vendors that are supplying institutions with learning technologies, I think one of the things we would want to see in that is an academic being able to adjust the way the AI responds to the learner. And we can only do that through that review cycle.
Speaking about that element of iterative improvement, what dialogues do you think are needed among various stakeholders to get that feedback and improve AI tools to meet the evolving needs of higher education? As we know, the sector itself is also evolving. What conversations should we be having? Trasa?
I think this kind of goes back to a point discussed earlier a little bit in terms of the human-centered, but students. We need to talk to the multitude of stakeholders. So whether it's students, whether it's staff, but also companies. What is the expectations that they're looking for when students leave university as well? So we need to consider the multitude of stakeholders that and at the different stages and their expectations of, well, students are starting at this particular point. We always presume students are tech savvy. We always presume students are digitally amazing and fantastic. But as Mike pointed out earlier with his child and their friends, that, they don't know exactly how to use it. So, but we need to understand how they are using it. So that dialogue needs to happen with students, but then that dialogue needs to happen with companies of, well, what do you expect students to be able to do when they come to you in terms of using those AI tools? And sometimes students aren't even aware that they are using an AI tool. That, like in PowerPoint, we can use certain tools and they're like, oh, didn't quite realize that was actually AI. And so it's the multitude of stakeholders and not just ignoring one particular grouping. And understanding as well staff and where they're coming from, this human-centered approach, which has been mentioned multiple times, and that it comes back to whether it's a module leader or the academic, but what about professional service staff as well, and how they're using it with their students, whether it's in the library, whether, for example, here at the University of Liverpool, we have Centre of Innovation and Education, and how they're helping different staff members, how they're helping different student members. So there's a dialogue that needs to happen with a multitude of stakeholders.
To continue on that point, we are hearing more and more that AI isn't just shaping the classroom, it's also shaping the future of work, with AI predicted to be among the top skills for employability by 2030. How does a proactive approach towards using AI in the classroom prepare students for that future of work? I know, Trasa, you had an interesting perspective on that earlier, but what's your take on that?
Yeah, like AI is a very important tool. We are teaching students, you know, one of our student attributes for when they finish university is they need to be digitally savvy. And I think that's the key point. And a point was mentioned earlier by panelists was you could go into a session, learn all about a new AI tool, and by the time you come out of it, actually, sorry, it's out of date, it's no longer being used. So it's not that students need to learn a particular tool. Students need to have the skill to be adaptable. Students need to have the skill to be resilient. And trying to teach resilience and trying to teach adaptability can be quite tricky. And so we need to figure out ways to, for me, that I was at a conference recently and it was about this element of positive stress, of building a scaffolding at university where students are allowed to fail so that when they go into the workplace, they know it's okay to fail, that not, and in using these AI tools, that sometimes they're not good, that they don't work, that they need to apply that skill and adaptability to the changing needs of what AI can actually bring. So yes, AI is very important. I don't disagree that AI is very important, but I think the skill that's needed behind is the students' learning of how to use those tools and that adaptability and that resilience. And I think we should be teaching that with the AI tools.
Thank you. Yuan-Jen.
Yeah, so Trasa actually gave a very good summary on what we actually need to focus on. And here we actually think of the AI impact of the discipline in two ways, right? So what we have been discussing so far essentially is thinking about using it as a new technology, right, in our original teaching and learning, right? So we call this the use AI approach, right? So you basically, your content of the course is essentially the same, but you use it, right, to enhance certain aspect of it. But we also realize that the impact of AI in the discipline can go much further than that, to the level that it may have already changed certain workplace practices for a particular discipline. Give you one of the very common example would be, for example, the junior lawyer, when they actually go into a law firm, when they actually started to do work, the kind of work they actually can do now can actually already be influenced by the AI tools. So now junior doctors actually need to have a new skill set, right, in a sense. So the way that we actually want to think about this is we encourage our colleagues to think about the X plus AI, where X is actually a discipline, right? So in this case, it's law plus AI. So you not only want to enhance your teaching and learning using technology, but you may actually need to come out with new courses that actually teach students their new skills, right, that is in the industry for your discipline. Right, so that's the other aspect that we actually encourage colleagues to think about. Yeah.
I think we can wrap up the panel discussion there and move on to the audience Q&A. And I have a really interesting question that ties into what Yuan-Jen just said. The question is, we always talk about how to use AI to achieve the intended learning outcomes, but how do we know what new learning outcomes and skills should be added in the age of AI? Can I get your take on that, Yuan-Jen?
Yeah, so we realize from our center, for example, we tend to actually teach a generalized skill set. Then we realize that for this particular question, the challenge is that we actually can't understand the domain itself, right? So for example, the law example I gave you, we won't be able to figure that out until we actually talk to a law faculty member. Right, so I think the key thing here is actually to get the domain expert, which is actually the faculty members in each of the to start to think in this direction. Fortunately, there are a lot of examples already happening in the world, right? So if you actually look into biology, right, look into digital, so those are actually examples where AI already changed the discipline, and then you can start to learn from there. Right? So I guess the suggestion here will be to invite colleagues in the discipline to start actively thinking about this. Yeah, not to wait, right, for the things to actually happen to you, rather than you're leading the change, right? So I guess that's the idea. Yeah.
Thank you. The next question I have is, how can we...
Sorry to interrupt,
Yes,
but I just add to that as well. I think that it's a really good point. And The other thing is to take into consideration, going back to the stakeholders, is the industry experts as well. What are their expectations? What do they want the students to be able to achieve coming out as well? So whilst, you have your intended learning outcomes in relation to maybe your specific discipline, the academic side, that literature side, but also kind of the skills. Like, we just did a major redevelopment of 5 of our postgraduate programs. And in doing so, we had several panel points with different stakeholders from outside the university in terms of, well, what are their expectations?
Thank you. The next question I have is, how do we distinguish between what tools to use and what not to use? We did touch on that earlier in the discussion, but any other thoughts on that? Rafi, could I come to you on this?
Yeah, actually, it's very difficult to say this tool is for you and that's another. It's to be frank, Annie. It's basically what a technologist is. We always collect requirements from educators as well as from the learners. Every day in and out, we are receiving. We are seeing what are the pain points, what are the problems, and then we try to see how we make the learning and teaching efficient. So whenever we do that, we collect these requirements. We go through and look for certain any AI tools that could match us to this requirement. I can give you one use case in our scenario. As I told you before, that we want to do an assessment, auto grading on assessment. So we give it to two groups of educators in our site, and we found first those educators use those tools, and they said, "Oh, it's not that efficient. We need to do 2-3 steps to get to that, and it's not efficient." And then we gave the same tool to another set of group of faculties, and but their disciplines are different. So then we found out that they said, "Oh, this is amazing tool for us." So we leave them to use that, those disciplines trying to use those assessment tools, which use AI to do grading and auto scoring. Then we have to figure out, because in a STEM we have chemistry, physics, and also we have computer science and some other mechanical and engineering division. So we need to know their requirement really and match with their disciplines to exactly. It's very difficult task to. We cannot just list it in one line. This tool matches to mine and others. We cannot. We have several tools that could match to. One tool could match to one discipline and another group to another. So it's very. We need to understand the requirement to give that list. This is what the educators and the education technologists, they will keep doing it. And as we know, the technology is going so fast. We have also to test these tools. Another tool we have, like based on something to do with even taking attendance, in the classroom. So we found similar type of things. We gave this tool to one group of staff, and then another tool we gave them. We found there is a type of feedbacks, because we always get feedbacks from them, and then before we implement something, we want to do a piloting testing carefully, and then we list this tool can be used. This is how we approach this question of different tools.
Thank you. Mike, if I could come to you on a follow-up question from a VitalSource point of view. It's a different angle, but how do you evaluate whether an AI-based feature truly adds value from a learning outcomes perspective or a teaching and learning perspective? How do you weigh in on that?
Great question. I have 2 answers. For our own tools, we do lots of rigorous testing with students, with faculty, using all the tools that our learning science have at disposal, because we don't want to put anything out there that we don't think meets a certain criteria. Now, we also deliver a wide range of tools, and it's not our role to do the evaluation, but increasingly, we're trying to gather as much data as possible so we can deliver it to the folks who can be making those decisions. So you'll see us incorporating more and more data where we can around engagement, around outcomes, but it's not the data. We're not going to be doing that work ourselves. We're going to be evaluating what's the good data and what's not, but delivering to the folks like my fellow panelists to make those decisions, and doing so in an environment that makes it easy. But that's going to be very, very difficult. These tools are growing by the day. Now, we also think, just like when we see things in the past, although this technology is hard to find analogs because it's the fastest adaptive technology in history, but typically we'll be separating the wheat from the chaff over time, and there'll be a set of tools. But still, we're going to try to do what we can, but we can only do so much, and all we can really do is deliver data and tools to the folks to make those evaluations themselves.
Thank you. The next question we have is, how can educators strike the right balance between leveraging AI tools to personalize learning and ensuring students develop critical thinking and problem-solving skills independently? So it's about the balance question. Rafi, I can see you smiling. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the critical thinking is big. Basically is something that, it's very difficult nowadays. The AI tools are still need to, as I mentioned, it's only predicting. Still, the decision makings are still done by the educators. Educators will never be replaced, as we have gone through from the ages of internet to mobility and things like that. So it's not. So it's this balancing is very, very also again. It's a good question, but honestly, there is nothing we can say right straight to the point, which can answer this question basically. So we have to sometime, because when students want to write an essay, they just go to the ChatGPT, write something, and that essay is done in few seconds. But still, we need to read that context and take it. Is that really they wanted as in this as an essay topics? We still have to be there. The learner has to go and edit it. So he needs to know the basics of what the questions is asked for this essay to be created. So that skill has to be developed. So I request the educators is basically to do some smaller assessments in the classes, in immediate assessments or things like that, to understand their critical thinkings in the classroom when they're using technology. But we are sure that students are using AI tools, and we need to be, as educators, has to the gap to be filled in, but at the same time assess them in the classroom. So as mentioned before, my colleagues in the panel, is that we need to also change a bit on the way we teach using these tools, as well as the syllabus need to be adapted a bit as things technology goes, as well as the institutional policy should be merged in. And also, as educators in the classroom, we need to have some type of an assessments then and there to see how this balance of critical thinking and the AI tool is able to deliver things. Is that student is coping with this context, or is understanding, or he's not able to? So he's just using AI to just, we face this every day in and out. We have some use case, like even my parents talked about Turnitin, AI detectors. They themselves, some of the products also, they mentioned it's just for detection, just for information for the educators. It's not to take any decisions. The decision should be made by the educator itself, not by the tool.
There's another question pretty much in the same vein. It's about, does it still make sense to use essays as an assessment tool? So how do you make the case to students that this is still useful? And how do you do it in practice without ending up grading AI-generated content, which is, I guess, ties back to academic integrity and skill development? Any final thoughts? We only have a couple of minutes, but anyone would like to come in on that really quickly?
I don't mind coming in on that. I think it is a good question. I think this comes down to what the essay's purpose is. If the essay's purpose is to demonstrate somebody's ability to regurgitate knowledge, then it's probably going to be AIable. What we have to realize, the human element, is the unique ability to create new knowledge and new ideas, which is something that AI cannot do. All it does is replicate ideas and consolidate ideas that exist. Humans are uniquely placed to generate new ideas. So I think, and this comes back to the critical thinking component, if you structure an essay which is really, really focused around the criticality of knowledge and the generation of new ideas, then that is fairly AI proof. And what you want to do is be able to get a student to bring their own context to that essay as well, because again, the AI does not have any lived experience. we as humans have lived experiences. So the more you can then tie that essay to that individual student's context, that again makes it less AI-able as well.
Thank you so much. That's all the time we have. Many thanks to our panelists for making this an engaging and informative discussion, and to everyone in the audience for joining us and being part of the discussion. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and are leaving with some useful insights. We will share a recording of this webinar and a post-event summary article with you in the coming days. Thank you once again, and goodbye.